Behind closed doors in the Woking boardroom, Zak Brown thought he had finally constructed the ultimate destination for the reigning four-time world champion. He has the aerodynamic baseline, he has the commercial infrastructure, and he even secured Gianpiero Lambiase for the 2028 season to serve as the familiar technical anchor for a potential driver market coup. It looked like an unstoppable momentum shift that would eventually lure Max Verstappen away from the internal civil war at Red Bull Racing. But while the paddock was busy watching lap times and wind tunnel upgrades, Toto Wolff was quietly sitting on a structural checkmate that requires zero public statements and zero financial counteroffers. Today, we are stripping away the illusion of customer parity in modern Formula One to expose the hidden engine software politics that could permanently freeze Max Verstappen's dream move to McLaren, and why a contract extension signed until 2030 might actually be a golden cage for the British constructor. In this video, you'll understand why hardware parity is one of the greatest myths sold to the Formula One public, how Mercedes' high-performance powertrains in Brixworth maintains a suffocating operational leash over its customer operations, and why the inner circle of the Verstappen camp is suddenly terrified of stepping into a customer chassis for the 2026 engine revolution. Before we pull back the curtain on the technical data files that Toto Wolff controls, let us know in the comments below where you are watching this boardroom breakdown from today, and hit that subscribe button right now to join the only channel on the platform that exposes the real corporate chess games running Formula One behind the backs of the drivers. We don't care about the PR spin from the press officers, we follow the power, the contracts, and the leverage. To understand the sudden freeze in the Verstappen camp regarding a potential shift to Woking, you have to look at the explosive report published by renowned Formula One investigative journalist Ralf Bach via the F1 Insider Network, corroborated by whispers across automotor sport and De Telegraph. For over 12 months, the narrative has been simple. If Christian Horner loses control of the Red Bull empire, or if their in-house engine program stumbles ahead of the 2026 regulation change, Max Verstappen would simply activate his exit clauses and walk across the paddock to whoever possesses the fastest chassis. McLaren immediately emerged as the frontrunner. They have the structure, they have the leadership under Andrea Stella, and they have the long-term vision. But Ralf Bach dropped a bombshell that completely shifted the boardroom calculation. According to his sources within the paddock elite, there is deep, systemic concern within the Verstappen management camp, led by Raymond Vermeulen and Jos Verstappen, regarding McLaren's permanent status as a customer of Mercedes engines. And here's the part that casual observers completely miss when they read Appendix 9 of the FIA sporting regulations regarding power unit supply. The regulations mandate strict hardware parity. If Brixworth builds a combustion engine, a turbocharger, an MGUK, and an MGUH for the factory Silver Arrows driven by George Russell or Kimi Antonelli, they are legally obligated to supply the exact same physical mechanical components to their customer partners at McLaren, Williams, and Aston Martin. The valves, the pistons, the block, the battery cells, they are physically identical when they leave the factory floor in Northamptonshire. But in the ultra-complex world of modern hybrid Formula One, the hardware is just the dumb metal. The actual performance, the drivability, the deployment curves, and the energy harvesting efficiency are entirely governed by software architecture and operational parameters. Which brings us to the quiet friction that erupted earlier this season, a technical drama that was largely swept under the rug by international broadcasters, but caused massive alarm bells to ring inside the Verstappen camp. At the start of this year's championship campaign, McLaren suffered a series of mysterious, debilitating power unit anomalies that directly compromised their early title defense. Both Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri were hit with severe battery and electrical issues that sidelined them during critical sessions at the Chinese Grand Prix. Just weeks later, on the streets of Monaco, Lando Norris was once again crippled by energy storage complications that forced the team to take unauthorized grid penalties for deploying a fourth battery pack way too early in the calendar year. When you are fighting for a world championship against a relentless machine like Max Verstappen, losing electrical deployment for even 0.2 of a second per lap is the difference between champagne and the mid-grid scrap. At the time, Zak Brown and Andrea Stella voiced bitter frustration behind the scenes, complaining that their power unit behavior felt fundamentally different from the factory Mercedes operation. They did not accuse Toto Wolff of providing illegal hardware because they knew the physical engines were identical. What they were complaining about was the management software, the charging algorithms, and the information flow regarding thermal limits. And this is where Toto Wolff's passive leverage becomes an absolute lethal weapon in the driver market. So, follow the chain of command here. Mercedes high-performance powertrains does not have to break a single FIA rule to starve a customer team of that final 1% of optimization. They simply follow the absolute letter of the law regarding information sharing, and not one single character more. When the factory team runs their internal simulations in Brackley, they generate petabytes of telemetry regarding how to extract maximum deployment from the battery without causing thermal degradation to the energy store. They know the exact microseconds to harvest energy under braking, and they know the precise software mapping required to smooth out the torque curve when the driver applies throttle on exit. As a customer, McLaren receives the baseline operational software required to run the engine safely and legally. But when it comes to the deep, experiential data, the dark arts of energy management that take years of trial and error to decode, Toto Wolff is under zero obligation to hand Zak Brown the master keys to the castle. Let me ask you a direct question right now, and I want you to pick a side in the comments. Would you ever risk leaving a dedicated factory team where you are the undisputed center of the universe to join a customer team where your biggest corporate rival controls your engine software mapping? Or does Max Verstappen owe it to his own legacy to demand a works engine operation, no matter how chaotic the internal politics get? Cast your vote in the comments right now, because this is the exact dilemma keeping Raymond Vermeulen awake at night. This software starvation dynamic brings us directly to the looming shadow of the 2026 regulation overhaul, which makes McLaren's customer status 10 times more dangerous for an elite driver than it is today. In 2026, the Formula One rulebook undergoes the most radical transformation in the history of the sport. The internal combustion engine will drop down to roughly 50% of the total power output, with the remaining 50% coming entirely from a massive 350 kilowatt electrical energy recovery system. The MGUH is being completely eliminated, which means all of that electrical energy must be harvested solely through the rear axle under braking and deployed with surgical precision down the straights. Under these new rules, engine management software will no longer be just a supportive tool. It will be the absolute lifeblood of competitive lap time. If an engine manufacturer discovers a clever software trick to harvest energy while minimizing rear brake instability, or if they develop an advanced deployment map that prevents battery clipping at the end of a long straight, they are going to optimize that code for their own factory chassis first. Why on earth would Toto Wolff allow his engineers to immediately hand over their most sensitive, championship-deciding software secrets to Zak Brown, a man who is actively trying to defeat Mercedes on the global stage? He wouldn't, and Max Verstappen knows it. For his entire tenure at the summit of Formula One, Max Verstappen has operated within the absolute protective bubble of a fully fledged works environment. When Red Bull Racing partnered with Honda, the engineers in Sakura, Japan, did not just build a generic engine and ship it to Milton Keynes. They tailored every single dimension, every heatsink, and every software line of code to match the radical aerodynamic packaging of Adrian Newey's chassis and the aggressive throttle control of Max Verstappen's right foot. When Honda temporarily stepped back, Christian Horner and Helmut Marko took the terrifying multi-hundred-million-dollar plunge to create Red Bull Powertrains precisely because they understood the golden rule first uttered by Ron Dennis over a decade ago. No customer team can ever truly dominate Formula One over an extended era when the engine supplier is also competing against them on track. Zak Brown attempted to buy stability and reliability when he signed an extension that binds McLaren to Mercedes customer power until the end of the 2030 season. On paper, it was a sensible, conservative corporate decision that guaranteed Woking access to one of the most reliable powertrains in the world, without the crippling financial overhead of building an engine department from scratch. But in the ruthless, high-stakes game of Formula One power politics, that conservative signature has transformed into a golden cage. Zak Brown has built a Ferrari-beating, Red Bull-hunting aerodynamic masterpiece, yet he is forced to plug his entire championship destiny into a data umbilical cord that leads directly back to Toto Wolff's desk in Brackley. Here is the second question you need to consider as we approach the final verdict. Who truly holds the power in this relationship? The customer team with the superior aerodynamic efficiency, or the engine manufacturer who holds the encryption keys to the battery management software? Let me know your analysis in the comments below. When you look at the recent chess moves, including McLaren's aggressive pursuit of Gianpiero Lambiase for 2028, it becomes crystal clear that Woking is trying to build a psychological home for Max Verstappen. They are trying to recreate the Milton Keynes support system brick by brick within the walls of the McLaren Technology Center. But all the familiar engineers and all the high-salary contracts in the world cannot rewrite the laws of physics and software ownership. Max Verstappen is an obsessive technician who spends his weekends analyzing telemetry and sim racing layouts. He is acutely aware that joining a customer team in the middle of an electrical engine revolution is the ultimate competitive gamble. He would be placing his fifth, sixth, or seventh World Championship trophies entirely at the mercy of a Mercedes customer relations department that ultimately answers to Toto Wolff. So, follow the ultimate endgame here. Toto Wolff has spent the last 18 months publicly flirting with the idea of bringing Max Verstappen to the Silver Arrows. He has praised him in the press, he has held casual meetings with Jos Verstappen in the paddock motorhomes, and he has consistently kept the door open despite signing George Russell and Kimi Antonelli. Many analysts assumed Toto was simply playing mind games to destabilize Christian Horner's locker room. But the real strategy is far more Machiavellian and far more brilliant. Here's the verdict. Toto Wolff does not actually need to sign Max Verstappen to win this specific battle. He simply needs to ensure that Max never signs for McLaren. By keeping Zak Brown locked into a long-term customer agreement, where software parameters and telemetry data remain strictly controlled by the factory hierarchy, Toto Wolff has erected an invisible, impenetrable barrier around Woking. He knows that a driver as ruthless and detail-oriented as Max Verstappen will never willingly step into an engine ecosystem where his primary competitor holds the master software switch during a 50-50 hybridization era. Zak Brown thought he was buying guaranteed performance when he extended the Mercedes partnership through 2030, but what he actually bought was a permanent ceiling on his driver market ambitions. Toto Wolff has successfully used the legitimate, legal boundaries of customer engine supply to quietly sabotage McLaren's ultimate dream without ever lifting a finger in the public press. Until McLaren either builds their own engine or convinces a dedicated works manufacturer to enter the sport exclusively for them, the world champions will always look at Woking and see a brilliant team that is ultimately running on borrowed power. That is the true reality of the Formula One boardroom, and that is why the driver market remains locked in Toto Wolff's palm. Thank you for joining us for this deep investigation into the engine politics shaping the future of Formula One. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave your thoughts on the Mercedes software trap in the comments below. We will keep tracking the power plays across the paddock until the next one.